I wasn't thinking of anything except for the fact that I wanted to be with David. I closed my eyes and was transported to a scene in the ocean. I had never seen this animal before, ever. And it looked like a dolphin. And I stared at it and I realized it had David's eyes. And I thought, oh my gosh, David has changed forms and he is now in the ocean. And it was very peaceful and very gentle. And all of a sudden, this beautiful, fat animal started swimming towards me, but it entered me. And I experienced the most incredible sense of love and joy and understanding and recognition that somehow David's soul had transported into this animal and he was still alive.
Today, our guest is Rebecca Austill-Clausen, Reiki Master, occupational therapist, award-winning author, and international speaker. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Let me go ahead and share with the folks who you are. Rebecca had a life-changing, spiritually transformative experience along with a shared death experience that eased the pain of her 37-year-old brother's passage. After 20 years of silence, Becky finally gained the courage to share her spiritual journey. She sold her large rehabilitation practice that she grew from one-person operation to a staff of over 350 therapists serving over 100,000 clients. Rebecca's metamorphosis is described in her award-winning book, Changemaker: How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. Wow.
Mhm.
So I tend to ask the same question with every guest, which is, where does your story begin?
It is so nice to be here, and you have such a lovely voice. And so thank you very, very much. Gosh, my story begins in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And my brother David and I were walking along the beach at Coast Guard National Seashore. And David had, David, let's see, David was at that point early 30s as far as age. So this was in the 1990s. And David had come out that he was gay when he was in his 20s. And our family very well accepted this, which was excellent. And so in the 1990s, for those of you that may be a little older, you might remember that there were thousands and thousands of people that were passing of AIDS. And it was a horrible time to be living. And so anyway, I was just walking on the beach and said to David, have you been tested for AIDS? And he turned away. And that was not what I expected to happen. And all of a sudden, the sun went behind the clouds and my heart started to beat faster. And it was the longest 10 seconds of my life. And David turned back and he said, I'm HIV positive. And I feel like a goofball for saying this, but at that time, I didn't know what that meant. And I'm like, well, David, what does that mean? And he said, it turns into AIDS. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I guess at that point he was about 30, 33. My 33-year-old brother was going to pass. And I think everything in life is positive. And there was nothing positive about the fact that David was going to die. And I said to him, David, are you getting good medical care? And she could tell it's a Boston accent. But anyway, we grew up around Boston. David was still living around Boston. And he said, yes, I'm getting the best care possible. And he went to Boston and it was excellent care. And he said, please don't tell anybody. I'm doing the best I can. And I'm taking care of myself and I'm doing fine. And I thought, oh my gosh, of course, I won't tell anybody. And it was interesting because I didn't have a support system. And I ended up following my instinct to go to the local bookstore, Barnes and Noble in Exton, Pennsylvania, because I was living in Pennsylvania. And I'm a science-based occupational therapist. And I didn't know about anything except for science. That's what I knew. But I found myself in the New Age section, which I didn't even know what that was. And I'm like, New Age, what is that? But I looked at books that were about the afterlife. And so I started to read books that were written by people that seemed quite reasonable, that there was an afterlife. And so I sent some of them to David. And when he passed, he was aware generally, and so was I, but we weren't concentrating on that. that there was an afterlife. So it helped me to think, okay, maybe there is an afterlife.
So you and he have this amazing relationship. The shocking news comes. You introduce the notion that there is an afterlife, but then you have this spiritually transformative and shared death experience. Can you fold back the layers and bring us into that?
Yes, you have such a nice voice, honest to Pete.
So sweet. Thank you.
Well, it's honest. Yes. So David lived for 7 years. He had 7 years at that time. He was considered a long-term survivor. And I received a call at work, and I work a lot. And my parents never call me at work, but David had always said, if he goes to the hospital in an ambulance, he isn't coming back. And he was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. And my parents called me and they said, Becky, I just want to let you know David is now on his way to, gosh, I'm blanking on which hospital it was, Excellent Hospital in Boston. And I thought, oh my gosh. And they did say he went in an ambulance. And so I called my assistant and she came in and gave me my schedule and we immediately made plane tickets. And I rushed to the plane and got on just as the doors were closing and arrived at the hospital. And I had packed my black suit, which I was hoping I didn't have to wear. But I arrived at the hospital, went to see David, and my parents and my sisters were there. And David said, Becky, I'm so sorry to take you away from work. And I thought, oh, brother, that is a terrible thing to say. Of course I'm going to come away. But yeah, I mean, I did work a lot. And so anyway, David was there in the hospital for about 6 days. And the last day that I thought it was going to be the last day, I didn't want David to pass by himself. And so I asked the nursing staff, can I please stay with David? And he had his own private room, which was very nice. So they said yes. And I woke up about 3:00 in the morning and David was on gosh, I feel like a goofball. I always get this confused, whether it's a respirator or a ventilator, but he was being provided with some breathing support. And so he was, he had that like harsh breath. It was really tough. And so that's how he was breathing when I woke up, but I didn't feel anything. And I was not spiritual and was not psychic. And I didn't know about energy at the time, but I didn't feel any presence from David whatsoever. And I thought, well, this is interesting. His body seems to be alive, but his soul, his spirit did not seem to be there. What should I do? My parents live 20 minutes away. I could go home to my parents' home and say, well, David's body is still alive, but I didn't feel a need to stay. That seemed ridiculous. And so David had a couple of crystals, quartz crystals that he loved. And one was from his friend Edward and one was David's. And I picked up both crystals and put them in my hand for whatever reason. I'd never done anything like this, but that's what I did. And then David was lying flat on his back. And so I grasped his hand with the 2 quartz crystals, and crystals have energy. And when I picked up Edward's crystal, I felt a little tingling, like, oh. But I wasn't thinking of anything except for the fact that I wanted to be with David. And so I closed my eyes and was transported to a scene in the ocean. Now, I'm a Pisces, David's a Pisces, my dad's a Pisces. We used to have the triple celebration for birthdays. And David had a shunt for a couple of years, and so he wasn't able to go swimming, which he loved. But he was I saw an animal in the ocean. And I had never seen this animal before, ever. And it looked like a dolphin, but it was fat. And it didn't have the hump on its back. And it had a tail fin. And I looked at this fat, lovely, peaceful animal. And I stared at it. And I realized it had David's eyes. And I thought, oh my gosh, David has changed forms. And he is now in the ocean. And isn't that interesting? And it was very peaceful and very gentle. And all of a sudden, this beautiful fat animal started swimming towards me very slowly. very, very slowly. And it took a while, but it entered me. And I experienced the most incredible sense of love and joy and understanding and recognition that somehow David's soul had transported into this animal and he was still alive. And after a long time, I mean, maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, the animal slowly left and it swam away. And on the right-hand side was a smaller animal that I thought was David's friend, Edward, who had recently passed about 6 months ago. And I thought, oh my gosh, Edward is with David, which is exactly what I had hoped would happen. And then he's leaving. And I was feeling very peaceful and very comforted that somehow David was, his energy, his consciousness was still alive. And this animal turned around and looked at me and then swam away. And by this time it was about 4:20. So a fair amount of time had passed. And I'm like, oh, now what? And I just needed to go outside. And so I went outside into the hospital area, garden area, and hung around with some trees and just spent time in nature. And my parents came at 7:30 in the morning. And thank goodness for them, because my dad's a minister and we had never talked about the afterlife. Quite frankly, we had not. And I told him what had happened. And my mom sort of looked a little curious at me. And my dad said, Becky, people deal with death in all sorts of ways. And I'm like, okay. He didn't say I've lost my mind or whatever. And come to find out, that's what's called a shared death experience. And I didn't know that for years. And it was really quite something.
Gosh.
I
Thank
know.
you.
Becky's story is amazing. There is, I know this story. Becky and I know each other, and so I know this story. And but it's riveting every time I hear it or I read it. So there's more.
There is more. You want me to go on?
You're on a roll. Take it away.
Yeah, we'll get to the questions after.
Oh, sure. So it is quite something. I mean, it really was a magical time. But you still have the grief and you still have the feeling of, why did this happen? And I couldn't understand it. And my heart was closed. My heart was closed for 6 weeks. And when you're feeling, when you feel so much grief, you can't feel anything except for the grief. Well, I had a horse and I was riding my horse. 6 weeks later, I'm riding my horse to a Christmas tree farm. And that day I got the best present of my life. And it was a beautiful day. It was in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania. We had just had our first frost. David passed on October 1st. So this was middle of November. We had our first frost with icicles hanging from the trees and rainbows sparkling. It was a beautiful day. And I opened my heart just a little and said, thank you, universe, for a beautiful day. I closed my eyes and there was my brother David. And he was in human form, wearing a black and red plaid flannel shirt, dungarees, and sandals. I had never, ever, ever, ever done this, heard about it, seen anything like this, but it was real. And the scene was luminescent, filled with love. And my eyes were closed. I started to talk with David and realized I didn't have to talk. I could just share thought. And within a split second, he was great. I was great. We're feeling wonderful. I looked to the right. There were my mom's grandparents, Abe and Bessie Dole, Wellesley, Massachusetts. They passed about 10 years ago, holding hands like they always did. There was Edward. Edward was right there in human form. A friend of mine, Holly, who had passed 20 years ago in a motor vehicle accident. And then there were about 24 other people on the hill. I was a church organist and I played the organ for a lot of funerals. And a lot of people who were on the hill were from the church. And so, do you want me to give you the short version or the long version?
I kind of want the long version. Like there's a lot here. You've got the energy. We'd love to hear the real story.
I'm watching Kristin's face this whole time. So
Joy.
Okay, so here's all these people. And the whole scene was brilliant, filled with love. I turned back and looked at David, and behind David was a golden arch. Now, it wasn't McDonald's. I had read when I found out that David had was HIV positive, and then that turned into AIDS. I started reading dozens and dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of books about the afterlife, had shared some with David. And some of these books said, if you ever see a door and you feel like going through, go through it. So I had this arch behind David, and I looked to him to see if he was going to take me through this arch. And instead, my 4'10" grandmother takes me by the hand, and we skip through this arch. And on the other side of the arch is a fuchsia colored land. Now, my husband Jeff and I have 2 boys, Kenny and Ryan. And at this time when this had happened, they were about 6 and 8. And now they're in their late 30s. And they say to me now, as you can tell or imagine, they have heard this story a few times. They say, Mom, don't say fuchsia. Don't say you saw a fuchsia colored land. And I'm like, why not? And they said, it sounds like you're tripping, sounds like you're high, sounds like you're loaded. And I wasn't any of those. And I'm like, well, it was fuchsia. So anyway,
It's your
I
hair.
it was like the hair. Oh, I never thought of that.
I just thought of that for the first time.
Oh my golly, that is excellent. That's correct. Like my hair. And so at this point, I heard my dad's dad, Gramps. I didn't see him, I heard him. And he says, get over here. And he had passed about 15 years ago. And we love everybody had tremendous love all around. So Gramps takes me by the hand, and we seriously fly through this fuchsia colored land for what seems like hours, reminiscing, having a wonderful time, just reliving our joy of being together. And all of a sudden, the horse starts to move. So I'm flying in the air with Gramps, holding onto his hand. The horse is moving. And I say, Gramps, I need to go back. We do this U-turn, and the horse is still moving. Do this U-turn. He brings me right to the arch. We fly through the arch. The horse is still moving. I land right in front of David. And David's still there. My grandparents, Edward, Holly, 24 other people, everybody's still there. And the horse is moving. And I say, I think I need to go back. And you know what they all said at the exact same time? We will always be here. We will always be here. It was fantastic. And just a little note so that you can hear what happened. I pulled up the reins and I thought, what just happened to me? And sat there for a good long time and then went back to work. Like, okay, I need to go back to work. But that day, this is in the mid-90s, that day I went to the library after work, went to the library, and I walked up and down the corridors because we didn't really have the internet. It was mid-90, 1995. And I thought, I'm going to find something that's going to explain what happened. But I had no idea what to look for, what anything was called or any of that. I think I thought a book was going to fall out and be the book, which it did not happen. So I went to the local health food store. It was in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and looked on the bulletin board. Nothing happened. And normally I try very hard to make things happen. I don't usually ask. It's a good lesson to ask. And so I asked for a teacher and then let it go. And a couple of weeks later, a friend of mine who was on my staff, an occupational therapist, Dr. Amy Carroll, who's now teaching at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, she came in and she said, how are you doing? And I was not telling anybody about any of this. Plus, I was sort of wondering if this was real, but it felt real and it was real, but I wasn't telling anybody. And I said to Amy, well, it's rough. It's really challenging. And she said, I met somebody that I think you'd like. And I'm like, who is that? And she said, I met a shaman. And I'm like, well, what do you mean a shaman? And what is a shaman? And she said, well, I'm not really sure, but I believe a shaman believes that everything natural has energy. And she also talks with people that have passed on. And I'm like, no kidding. And I ended up meeting this wonderful woman, Nancy Ariel, who was subsequently passed. But she apprenticed with her for 3 to 6 hours a week for a year and learned how to continue talking with David, met tons of spirits, tons of entities, learned that life continues forever. And learned Reiki, became a Reiki practitioner, 10 years later, Reiki Master. It has been a blast of an experience and very magical.
Mhm.
No
Yeah.
understatement there. No understatement there. Wow. Wow. So you're now continually in conversation with David and so many others who are living on the other side. What can you tell us? Because you've got all these different people who have different experiences of, I'm going to call it heaven. What should we know about heaven?
It's a very good question, and I can't say that I'm in continual communication
Okay.
because a lot of times it happens, for me, it happens, and many people, when you go outside, because you really want to connect with yourself, with your heart. You want to really be as connected as possible. But, it's an interesting question. What is heaven? To me, it is a continuation of consciousness. We're all connected. We're all connected. And the commonality between heaven, and we can call it heaven or the afterlife or whatever you want to call it, and the life here on earth is love. That's the commonality. That is what is the continuing force, the continuing energetic drive between this life and heaven. And knowing, truly knowing, and I can give you all sorts of research and all that jazz, but truly knowing that we live forever, then you think, okay, why did I decide to come to Earth? Why did I decide that? And so you think, well, I decided to come to Earth. A lot of people say it's to jumpstart and to fast track our energetic awareness. And this is a rather challenging time these days in the world. And for us that are open, for people that are open and maybe healing practitioners, I believe we came onto this earth to help others heal. But first, we have to heal ourselves. It's not selfish, it's self-care. And that's what you two do. And it is very, very, very appreciated.
Mm.
Wow.
Becky, as I know you and I know your story, I would love for you to share a little bit about, the occupational therapist that has this incredible experience who never expected it. And when you went to see Nancy, what did that opening begin to look like? Like,
Great question.
how did uh, how did you feel about what, like, did it feel like it happened all at once, or what was that process like?
Bernadette, it is so fun to see you again. Gosh, it is excellent. And that is a great question. And I mean, I've talked about this quite a bit, and nobody's ever asked me that specific question. And that is an excellent question. When I made an appointment to see Nancy, and I called her up, and I thought she'd be this quiet, demure, lovely, calm soul. And she had all sorts of energy. And I'm like, oh, good. Okay. And the morning that we had arranged to get together, I have a tendency to get up early. So it was 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was at work. I went to work. And it was snowing very, very, very hard. And I thought, oh my gosh, Becky, this is ridiculous for you to stop work and go to see Nancy and all that. But there was no way I was going to not see her. And so I drove really, really slowly, and the roads were horrendous. And about halfway through, because she lived in Reading, Pennsylvania, like in Monopoly, Reading, Pennsylvania, that's where she lived. And so it was about an hour away. And halfway through, all of a sudden, the skies cleared. And I was like, well, wow, that was interesting. And so I get to Nancy's, and I'm always cold. And so I had my down coat, big boots, sweaters, the whole thing. And I get out of my car. The snow's this deep. And I go to see Nancy, and she opens up the dress. She opened up the door in a sundress. I looked at her and I thought, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? And I just stopped for a minute and looked behind her, and there were lovely plants, and she had lovely smile. And I thought, okay, Beck, just trust yourself. We went in, and she asked me some questions and shared about heaven and the afterlife and all that. And if you don't mind, I'm going to give you a little bit of a more story on this.
Mhm.
She said, would you like to go on a journey? And I was like, sure, I'll go on a journey. And I didn't know what that was. It was a shamanic journey. She had me lie on her massage table in a beautiful room, crystals all around, glass, looking out at the woods. It was fantastic. So I'm lying on my back, and funny little thing, she was giving me Reiki. I didn't even know what Reiki was. She was giving me Reiki and started at my feet. And I always had very smelly feet, very smelly. And I'm like, well, why don't I just ask her if she can cure my smelly feet? I said, Nancy, I have very smelly feet. Can you please cure them? Honest to Pete, since that day, they have not smelled anymore. Like, all right. So anyway, I'm lying on my back. I hardly ever say that, but it seemed appropriate in this particular occasion.
What a nice bonus for us.
Great bonus. So I'm lying on my back, and she says, Becky, there's all sorts of spirits around, and here's all these angels. And my eyes are closed, and I seriously wanted to open them up to see these angels, but I didn't. And she says, okay, we're going to go on a journey, and there's going to be a bird that's going to come and pick you up. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'd never done anything like this. And so a big, and I was like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be a robin or a hummingbird, or whatever. And this big, huge black bird, which for me was a raven, came down. And she says, it's okay, Becky, just look at it and say hello, which I did. And she says, now you can get on its back and you're not going to hurt it. You can get on its back. So I got on its back, and we traveled through heaven, in my opinion, traveled into other realms of consciousness. And we went through, it was almost like a tunnel, classic spiritual transformative experience. I didn't know this. We go through, it was like a tunnel. There was a light at the end. We get through that, and there were either six beings, tall, males. For me, they were males, and they had these this like a shawl, this over the head shawl, all the way down to their feet. I couldn't see their features. One of them stepped forward, and I thought it was God. And I knelt down in front of God. And I was an atheist and agnostic. I didn't really believe in God. My dad's a minister. I certainly grew up with all this. But I thought, oh my gosh, here I am in the presence of God. And God said, rise. And Nancy, I was saying this aloud to Nancy, so she was part of this whole thing. And she goes, Becky, ask a question. And I'm like, what question am I going to ask God? And she says, no, it's okay. Ask a question. And so I said, if I get into this, will my work, I put work first, will my work and my family and I be okay? And God said, yes, arise, you're doing fine. And it was really quite a phenomenal experience on that very first time with Nancy, to have this incredible shamanic journey. And it continued, and the ravens continued in my life. And anytime I see a big black bird, it's David, and there's all sorts of stories about that. But it was really very, very, very assuring. And when I was driving home, to get back to your original question, Bernadette, when I was driving home, I didn't listen to anything. I always had some music on or something. It was quiet. And I'm like, what is this? And it felt great. I trusted myself. And that's what we need to learn to do, is to trust your instincts, to trust your gut. And it felt right. And that's how it felt every single time that I was with her. And it was we had 3-hour sessions once or twice a week for a year. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
How did you integrate? So you're having these profound spiritual transformative experiences, and then here you are, you own this occupational therapy center, and you are in management, you're a businesswoman, you have children. How did you integrate both parts? Because I love that of all the questions you could ask God, that was the one that felt most important.
Mhm.
So it was all right. What made it all right, and how did you hold both worlds?
That's a great question. I felt like my brain was divided in half. And I had my business side, profit and loss, human relations, finance, business plans, all that. And then I had the spiritual side. And it worked. But I was able to switch between one to the other. And it worked really, really well. And it took me 20 years to find the courage to share what I've been sharing with you. And in order for me to share this, the business had grown, and when I ended up selling my business specifically to share this story, and I sold it to my chief financial officer. And the reason I sold it is because I didn't want to put the business, or particularly the staff that I had, my therapists, I didn't want to put their business, their profession at risk, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen if I started to share this story. And I was pretty well respected within the OG field. And there's a couple of funny stories in the book about having no filter and going to the American OT conference and sharing. And, it wasn't necessarily the right thing to do organizationally, but it was fine. Like, it was fine for me. And I didn't want to put any of this at risk. I didn't want to have people say, you work for someone who talks to dead people.
Right.
Like, I didn't want that.
Yeah.
And ended up selling it. And it has been a magical journey. And once we're on the right track, I fully believe that the universe, our spirits, our associates, that we can ask for their assistance. They will help us, and just things magically flow.
I would love to stay there, because I feel like, and I'm just going to self-disclose, the past couple of years, there's been a lack of flow. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, and I'm speaking specifically professionally. What advice, given your experience and what the other side has communicated with you, what advice would you have for folks?
Good. I'm asked that question a lot. And I am really quite clear in my mind that spending time outside in nature is very, very, very healing. And there's all sorts of books now out about the fact that trees communicate. They communicate, and they're alive, and they're beings. And wrapping your arms around the tree, if you allow yourself to do that, and just putting your heart against the tree and talking, just sharing your thought. You don't have to do it out loud, but you can if you want. Sharing your connection, you will get some healing from the tree, and you'll be able to calm yourself. And it's combined with deep breathing. I didn't know I was meditating. For 4 months, I would do deep breathing. I'd breathe in joy, and I'd release anxiety, and breathe in love, and I'd release stress, and breathe in peace, and just let go of whatever is bothering you. And I'm talking slowly. Do this. And if you can do this by a tree, around a tree, or at least out in nature, it really does help. And or you can do it by the ocean. Ocean for me is even bigger and broader, and sometimes it's harder. I spend a lot of time at the ocean, but sometimes it's harder to wrap your arms around the ocean, but you can do it around trees, and trees are very, very, very helpful. The other thing is, if you can have time with yourself early in the morning or late at night, or whenever is best for you, and give yourself permission to take time. And I don't mean a lot of time, like maybe 5 minutes, ideally 10 minutes, and just have time for you, where you sit by yourself without interruptions, turn off your phone, all of that, and allow yourself to connect with your heart, because that's the connection. It's to connect and trust, to trust. And Kristin, ask. That's the trick. The trick is to ask, because we have free will on this earth. And our guides, because I believe we all have guides. We're not going to be here alone on this earth. We have people that can help guide us. And it's really quite extraordinary to have people and spirits that can guide us and that are good at it, but they will not interfere unless we ask, because again, we have free will. So if you're connecting with yourself, and you're calm, and you're breathing deeply and letting go, and then with great love and reverence, say something like, I would love to know who you are. I would love to have assistance. I would love for you to help guide me. Or, what is your name? I would love to know your name. And you may get it immediately. A lot of times people get it immediately, but if you don't, it's okay. Then you might have a bird come real close to you, or you might have some connection with someone that's passed that reminds you of that person, and think, this is real. This is that person connecting with me, because your guides can be real, people that used to live here, or they can be people or energy that you've never met before. And say, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Love and gratitude. Those are the two that go together.
Mhm. So I've used some of Becky's advice that she shared with me over the years, and I want to say, I want to talk about the tree. When I was living in Vermont, I had this special little uh, forest that I used to go walking in. And at the beginning of it was a tree that we called a wolf tree. It was a tree, very, very, very large tree that the area had been grazing land, and they would keep a big tree, healthy tree, so it could shade the animals. And so when you go through a forest, sometimes you'll see one tree that is so out of character in its size, and it had been the tree that was the shade for the animals. And this tree, I had an amazing connection to this tree. And it didn't matter. I could go up to this tree and it could be dead, no wind, nothing. And all of a sudden the leaves would start to wave at me. And it was, I would go to this tree, I would cry at this tree, I would hug this tree. It was, and it's so out of character for me to have done something like that. And I think that's one of the things that the lessons of listening to Becky and reading her book, which is amazing, is that we sometimes have to let go of what we think is the normal and allow the fantastical to enter. Even if you just let it enter a little bit, just like Becky was saying, just start to allow yourself to believe that this could, this tree did this over and over. When I would go to it, the leaves, every single time the leaves would go. And, and then I knew that I had a relationship with this tree. So it is, I think what I love about Becky's story is this very serious-minded businesswoman who was whose brother decided that that wasn't the way she was going to live the rest of her life. So, with that, I just wanted to share that
Beautiful.
experience.
Bernadette, sorry, Kristin, I didn't mean to. That was beautiful. I loved hearing that.
I did too. I did too. It just really brought it home. And I think all of us, it's that moment of awe. It's those moments when you can get into that awe state, which is pure love.
Yes.
It's just pure love. And so I want to get back to David, speaking of pure love. Have you learned through all of this time what your soul connection is with him?
Well, that is an interesting question. Well, that is very interesting. I still consider him my brother. And when you ask, I really haven't thought about that. But that's the main connection that I have with him, is my brother. And he, I'm gonna have to think about that question. But anyway, it is very, I do believe that David was meant to pass early, and that it was meant for me to experience his passage and for me to experience the growth. He was my facilitator
Right.
in that whole process. I thoroughly believe that. And it's been so magical to have continuing relationships with my brother. And, I talk about it, but some people believe it and some people don't, and that's fine, because we can all believe whatever we want to believe. But for me, it absolutely made his passage very, very positive. And it did change my life into a magical state of awareness. Like, I've never been so happy in my whole life
Oh, I love
as
that.
Yeah, as now, I mean, I keep getting happier. It's like, wow, this is really quite something.
Well, it just exudes, whether it's your smile or your words or your energy. What how do you live today? You talked about gratitude, love, nature, but how do you live today that really helps to continue to fortify that happiness?
You know, that's an interesting question, particularly right now. This morning, I hung up. I just moved 3 weeks ago. Just moved, and I hung up this sign in my office. It says, there is nothing like a dream to create the future.
Mm.
There is nothing like a dream to create the future." And underneath that, I found this other little sign, and it says, "Living the dream."
Mhm.
So if we can have a dream, if we can have a thought, if we can have a plan that makes our heart sing,
Yeah.
go for it. Go for it. And that's what's happening. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. It's been
Mm.
really, really, really fun. And then to have both of you here, it's like, whoa, this is
I want to take you back because there's one thing that we're always, and I'm always trying to share with people that I work with, is that we communicate differently. We all communicate differently with spirit, and that my gifts don't mirror your gifts. And I just try and hang on to some of that joy and that energy. But I want you to share the story of your automatic writing, because
oh yeah.
some people, we've talked about that, different ways that spirit sometimes will begin to come to us. And I know you had that automatic writing experience. So I wanted to see if you'd share a little about that.
That's a good one. Thanks, Bernadette. So I go to the first year that this happened, I go to the American Occupational Therapy Association annual conference. And as I shared, I had no filter, error. It was an error politically, but whatever. And so it was the last day of the conference. And I thought, oh, and I went to some gathering, and I decided to sit beside a nun. I'm like, oh, I would like to find out what this person feels about the afterlife. Within 5 minutes, honest to Pete, within 5 minutes, this nun told me about automatic writing. And I'm like, automatic writing? What is that? And she says, well, it's when you are in meditation and you're journaling, your meditation, and your hand automatically starts to move across the page. And I'm like, you're kidding. She goes, no, I went to a workshop last weekend, and it was a New York psychologist, and it was a 2 to 3 day workshop, and he was telling me all about this. And I'm like, really? And so I thought, well, that's interesting. So I went home that day, and the next day I was riding my horse. And at that point, I was meditating in the woods about 7 times. And so I would go and meditate and have another meditation. It was fantastic. And then I would sit in my suburban car and write about it, because Nancy had said, Becky, when you have these experiences, you want to write them down and you date them. Date it with the year so that it can serve as validation when you need a little validation. And so I'm just writing what happened, and all of a sudden, I'm writing with a pen, and all of a sudden, my pen starts to move across the paper, and it was a poem. And I wish I could remember it, but it was something like the heaven above and the earth below. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can either freak out and have it stop or let it go. I mean, yeah, keep letting go. So I did. And I said, who are you? Who are you? And the answer was, I am love. Now, at that point, I didn't understand love. I knew love could be like between my husband and myself, or my kids, or whatever, but I didn't understand the big picture of love. And I'm like, love? And I put a question mark. And for me, it was a male presence. And he said, I am Lot. And then Lot proceeded to tell me these lovely things about how connected we are and all that jazz. Well, then the next day, I go into meditation and started writing. Lot came back, and I'm now on to 2 pages of information from Lot. The third day, I'm on like 3 to 4 pages. And by the 5th day of Lot coming, it's fast, coming really fast. And I'm writing fast. And Lot says to me, so I hear this in my head. Lot says, he called me Rebecca, Rebecca. and that's not how I spell it. I spell it Rebecca, but it's KAH, the way Lot did it. Because you don't judge, you just write whatever you hear or write. And so anyway, Lot says, Rebecca, you're a very good typist. Why don't you type? And I'm like, type? Like, to me, that was so incongruous because he's this ancient being, or I thought an ancient, spiritual, immortal being. How could I use a typewriter? No, it was a computer at that point. How could I use a computer? And he says, yeah, why don't you go do that? So I was at home at that point. I go downstairs, and this is the 90s, 1995. So, the computers are sort of big. I bring them up, sit at the dining room table, hands in ready position, close my eyes, and honest to Pete, the information flowed. And I've now got 4,000 pages of information from Lot. And it's very similar to Neil Donald Walsh, Talking with God. Conversations with God. Yeah. Very, very similar and very healing and very lovely and all of that. And Lot came every single day. And my husband would sit beside me and he'd say, ask him this. And I'm like, Jeff, you can ask too. He says, no, you ask. So I would type, Jeff wants to know, da, da, da. And he says, I want to trip him up. And he never could trip him up because Lot was real. And he gave very appropriate, honest answers. And Jeff was never able to trip him up. After about 3 months, Lot said, Rebecca, I need to go. I'm like, you need to go? And he says, yes, I need to stop because there are hundreds of spiritual entities that want to talk with you. And I'm like, no kidding. And so Lot left. He's come back a couple of times and I can still get him if I ask, but I usually like to see what I'm going to receive rather than ask. Mm-hmm. And it's been a blast. And so automatic writing is another way to do it. And you don't necessarily have to be 100% knowing this is automatic writing. It's just you start writing and you're recording your meditations and you're allowing your thoughts to go on to the paper. And you may then start to have thoughts that are not your own. And you don't have to judge and you don't proof until the very end, just let it flow. Yeah. And it's nice. So thanks, Bernadette, for asking about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and this is something that you've always said. It's when you are automatic writing or when you do feel them, it is coming through your heart.
Yes,
it is when you suspend your brain. Yeah. And that it flows through your heart. And, we communicate with our brain because it has language and we understand language. And so sometimes that's the first way that, but if you're in that place when you feel it in your heart, that it's coming directly.
That was excellent.
Yeah, well said. So I want to ask, there's so much going on in the world and the energy that we need to focus on is love, whether it's Lot or any other spiritual entity. I don't think it's an accident that we are here now. What wisdom have you received to those who are listening going, man, anytime I even look at the news, and I try not to look at the news, but I want to be aware and I want to be, a citizen who promotes justice. Like, how do we hold that, and why is this happening?
It is a curiosity. It is a time of change. I mean, it's quite significantly a time of change. It's unbelievable what's going on. Absolutely blows my mind.
It is. Yes, mine as well.
I encourage people. I encourage people to not get so involved in the crap. It's bad. It's absolutely bad. But if we focus on that, thought has energy. Mm-hmm. And if we focus on the bad, we're going to keep having the bad around us.
Yes.
So if we can focus on love, which seems almost ridiculous, but please focus on love and being kind and complimenting people. And if somebody looks good, say, hey, I really like your sweater. And it makes us feel good and it makes them feel good. And that concept of kindness, gratitude, sharing love can expand. And the more we can expand and concentrate on the positive that's happening or facilitating, the more we can facilitate that love, the more help it can be. I mean, I look at the news all the time. I don't watch TV. I don't like TV.
Same with me.
Yep,
Yeah.
don't watch TV, but I
Same with
do
me.
read, yeah, like
I
10
want to
minutes on my
stay
phone.
aware. And I have a friend, and actually a number of friends who are vulnerable given some of what is going on in the world. And I had one yesterday call me, and she was just so upset and so scared. And I'm saying, gosh, we just had a lovely person on the show who said, just pay no attention.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, well, I can't do that. I want to stay aware because awareness is power, but I don't want to get swallowed up. And I'm finding that balance. And I agree with you. It's like she was talking about someone who voted for someone that she was like, how could she have done that? And I said, what if the lesson in this is how do I love my friend even when I'm disappointed in her choices?
Oh, that's good.
Right? So it's finding those ways to
Mhm.
compliment, to be supportive, to be the opposite of what you see that is so unsettling. But for me, if I'm not paying attention, it feels irresponsible
Mhm.
because we are part of the
Mhm.
collective. But I
Mhm.
don't want to get so absorbed in it that I just become like I did, because I was just like, why aren't people protecting each other? Why aren't we loving each other? And there's good guys and bad guys. And I'm like, I can't do that. So how to walk the spiritual path with legs firmly on the planet
Yeah.
feels challenging often.
Yes, it does. But if we can concentrate on sharing that love and concentrate on the positive, which is very hard to do. But I mean, it's okay to check our phones or whatever and figure out what's happening that day and then let it go.
Yeah.
You're going to know it, just put it in the back
Yeah.
and then let's move forward.
Well,
Let's concentrate on the love.
it's the gratitude that you taught me, Becky. It is the in every moment to stop and be grateful. And it is interesting because in the beginning, when that concept about gratitude, it's not foreign, but you don't stop to think, I mean, there's sometimes I'm grateful for the ground I'm walking on. I've just turned gratitude into, as much as I can, and I still have a ways to go, but I try and turn it into, as soon as that negative energy is coming in, is to turn it out into gratitude for all. And that has been a huge, not only the love, but the gratitude helps me turn those difficult times around. So
Well said.
yeah.
Wow. Time goes by quickly. I say this with every episode because, like you, all of our guests are so extraordinary and loving. And I appreciate so much of all that you're teaching us. If there's any lesson when you think today, you've already shared about the love and the gratitude and the opening and the nature, there's so much. But is there any final thought you would like to leave our guests with?
First of all, thank you so much for having me share my story. It's been wonderful. And to be with both of you has been a massive gift. I encourage people to trust their heart, to trust their instincts. Of course, we already talked about sharing love and sharing gratitude, but take care of yourself. We have to take care of ourselves. So many times we take care of others because that's what we do. We take care of others, but we can take care of others better if we can connect with ourselves and allow ourselves to feel that love, to feel that gratitude, to feel that joy, to know that we are here at this time with all these challenges because we have the ability to ascend. We have the ability to be positive. We have that skill to know that we can express gratitude and love and kindness. It's very wonderful to be kind.
Yes.
Mhm.
Let's be kind.
Let's be kind.
Mhm.
God, I love that. Thank you for sharing your valuable time, wisdom, and heart with us. It's just been really beautiful. Appreciate you so much.
Thanks so much. Both of you are awesome. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Do you want to ask how we can
Oh, I forgot. I got to say, wrapped up.
Me
That's
too.
how-
I just
Thank you.
That was-
Let's go back. I forgot.
okay, I'm gonna
to say,
remove myself.
How can, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Love that we're not live. Okay. So, Rebecca, undoubtedly people are going to want to learn how to get in touch with you, how to learn more. Tell us about your books and where they can find you.
Oh, sure. Thanks so much. This has been a blast. Well, I have a long name, and so it is sort of challenging, but my email is my name. And so you can see my name on the screen, Rebecca Austill-Clausen. My email is Becky@Rebecca. Oh, here it is. Look at that. Here it is. Becky@RebeccaAustill-Clausen.com. And if you're listening, maybe without the visual, it's Becky, BECKY, at Rebecca, REBECCA, AUSTILL, and then CLAUSEN.com. And my website's the same as my name. So my website's RebeccaAustill-Clausen.com. And the book is called Changemaker: How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. And when I first got the book published, changemaker wasn't really quite a word. And now there seems to be a lot of change makers in Amazon and every place. And so if you go Changemaker Rebecca on Amazon, you can get it. Changemaker Rebecca, REBECCA. And it's a magical journey of what happened that first year when my brother passed. And it's all real. And it starts at the month of October. It goes to, I think, June or July, and every chapter is a month. And there's, at the end of every chapter is what's called an illumination. And that is where you can find out how to essentially replicate what happened to me. And when the book got published, I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope people don't think I've lost my mind. But there are approximately 235 references and resources in the back. So I think if people think I've lost my mind, at least you'll know I'm a well-read imbecile. And every resource is organized by chapter. So if you like the particular chapter contents, you can go to the back of the book and read them. And there's lots. I mean, when I wrote the book and published it in 1996. No, sorry, that's wrong. That's when I was really getting this whole thing. It was published in 2016. Sorry. 2016, there wasn't half as much information on how we can share love and the expansion of consciousness and all of that. So some of the books are a little bit dated, but they are classic. And it's been really, really fun.
The book is amazing. I have read it many times. So it is one of those books that you can read more than once.
You're so kind. Can I just say one more thing, if that's all right?
Yeah.
So I get this book published in September of 2016, and I was waiting for the OT Association to call me up and say, Beck, you're getting kicked out of the profession. But there's a component of OT that talks about complementary modalities and integrative health. And so I didn't get kicked out. And instead of been teaching Reiki, and my husband and I are visiting all the national parks. And so it was in the following spring, we were in the whole HOH rainforest in Olympic National Park, the state of
That's near
Washington.
me.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
my mom lives on Hoe Street. We're really close.
Well, go there. That's where you can go, and the energy there is.
Oh, it's extraordinary.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, we were in the whole rainforest, and I was looking at my phone and said, congratulations, Changemaker has just won 3 National Book Awards. Can you please come to the Book Expo in America in New York City and pick them up? And I'm like, all right. And it wasn't an ego. It was after death communication is hitting the mainstream. Yes. And it subsequently won 2 more National Book Awards. And it's a fun, easy book to read. And it's been really, really, really a blast to have that happen.
Oh, congratulations. And to you and to the collective. For exactly.
The collective. Yep. Yeah. And congratulations to you both for having the coolest podcast out there. This is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
How I Made It Through is produced and distributed by EIQ Media, LLC. Elevate your emotional IQ with podcasts and content focused on overcoming adversity, leadership, mental health, entrepreneurship, spiritually transformative experiences, and more.